A cold, biting autumn wind howled through the streets of Washington, D.C., as a solitary figure made her way forward. Her military boots were worn and scuffed, her uniform faded from months of wear, and her backpack hung loosely over her shoulders. Every step she took seemed to drain her energy, yet her posture remained resolute. As she neared the gates of the White House, the security guards on duty stiffened, eyeing her closely. "Ma'am, can I help you?" one of them asked. Without hesitation, she met his gaze, her blue eyes unwavering. "I need to see the president," she said, her voice steady and firm. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, but I've walked across this entire country for months just to be here. He needs to hear my story." The guard paused, his expression uncertain, but something about her presence told him she wasn't someone to be dismissed easily. Inside the White House, the security team exchanged murmurs, deliberating over the situation. It wasn't every day that a lone soldier arrived unannounced, but the woman's composure unsettled them. "She claims she's walked across the country to speak with President Trump," one guard reported. "Sounds like a stunt," muttered another officer. But when they checked her records, the name Sergeant Emily Luna, U.S. Army, honorable discharge, caught their attention. This wasn't just any soldier. A few moments later, an aide stepped forward. "I'll let the president know," he said, his curiosity piqued. Outside, Emily stood still, her hands clutching the straps of her backpack. She had come too far to be turned away. She wasn't about to back down now. Inside the Oval Office, President Trump listened closely as his aide explained the situation. "A female soldier walked across the country to see you?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as he set down his coffee. "She refuses to say why unless she tells you personally, sir," the aide replied. Trump leaned back in his chair, considering. It wasn't the first time someone had made a grand gesture to reach him, but there was something different about this one. Something that felt important. "Bring her in," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "Let's hear what she has to say." Minutes later, Sergeant Emily Luna was escorted into the Oval Office. Standing before the most powerful man in the country, she stood at attention, despite the exhaustion weighing on her body. Her muscles ached, but her resolve never wavered. "Sergeant Luna," President Trump said, studying her closely. "You walked all the way across the country to see me?" "Yes, sir," she answered simply. "Why?" he asked, his voice full of curiosity. She exhaled deeply, steadying herself. "Because there's something America needs to hear. Something I lived through." Trump motioned for her to sit. "You have my attention," he said, his tones serious. Emily hesitated, glancing at the portraits of past presidents that adorned the walls of the room. Then, with a deep breath, she began. "My journey started with a promise," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "And that promise led me here." The room fell silent as she continued. "I grew up in a small town in Texas," she began. "My brother James and we were inseparable. He was my hero." She paused, her eyes clouded with memories of a time long past. "We both enlisted after high school. He went into the Marines, and I joined the Army. We promised each other that no matter what happened, we would always come home." Trump listened closely, his expression solemn. But Emily continued, her voice tightening with emotion. "War doesn't care about promises," she said quietly. "In Afghanistan, my brother never made it home." She swallowed hard, her heart heavy with the weight of the loss. "I walked across this country because I needed to honor him, and I needed to tell you what happened next." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled letter. "This was from James," she said, her voice softening. "It came after he died. His last words to me." Trump reached out and gently took the letter from her. "My sister," he read aloud, "if you're reading this, I didn't make it. But don't cry for me. I lived with purpose. Now it's your turn. Tell my story. Make people listen." Emily wiped away a tear. "That's why I walked across America. Not for me, but for him. And for every soldier like him." The room fell silent again. The weight of her words hung in the air. "There are so many soldiers like James," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Heroes who are forgotten once they fall. Their families suffer in silence, and their sacrifices fade into obscurity. She looked President Trump directly in the eye. Mr. President, I couldn't let that happen. Trump leaned forward, his eyes narrowed in thought. So, you walked across the country to make sure they're remembered? Yes, Emily replied firmly. In every town, I told their stories. I met families grieving alone. I walked so they wouldn't be invisible. Trump nodded slowly, absorbing her words. You're saying America needs to do better? Yes, sir, Emily said. And I believe you can help. Trump rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You've carried their stories on your back, step by step. Emily nodded. Each name I carried was a life that mattered. Some people thanked me, others ignored me, but I never stopped. Trump tapped his desk, deep in thought. Do you have a list of their names? Emily opened her bag and pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with names, handwritten one by one. She slid it across the desk. This is them. Trump flipped through the pages slowly, absorbing the gravity of it all. This isn't just a story, he murmured. This is a movement. He glanced up at Emily. How many? He asked. Over 1,000, she replied. Every name belongs to someone who gave their life for this country. Trump exhaled, his gaze lingering on the list. You carry their stories across America. That takes strength. Emily nodded, but her expression hardened. But strength isn't enough. We need action. Trump met her gaze. What do you want me to do? She locked eyes with him, unwavering. Give them the honor they deserve. Let the world hear their names, for the first time in a long while. For a moment, Trump was speechless. Then he sat back, deep in thought. You walked all this way to tell their stories. Now, you want me to help carry them forwards? Emily nodded. Yes, sir. Trump glanced at the list once more. We can make sure these names are never forgotten, he said, his voice serious. What if I bring you on stage at a national event? You can tell America yourself. Emily hesitated, her eyes narrowing. I didn't do this for attention. Trump shook his head. This isn't about attention. It's about making sure people listen. Emily swallowed hard. Then I'll do it for them. The next day, rumors spread like wildfire. A mysterious soldier had walked across America to meet with the president. The press demanded answers. At a briefing, a reporter asked, "Who is she?" Trump's press secretary smiled. You'll find out soon. Meanwhile, Emily sat alone in a quiet White House room, mentally preparing herself. Soon, the world would hear her story. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A White House aide entered. Ma'am, the aide said, you're scheduled to speak tomorrow. The whole country will be watching. Emily exhaled deeply. She had walked thousands of miles to get here, and now all she needed to do was find the right words. The next day, she stood behind the podium at a nationally televised event, President Trump at her side. The crowd was silent, waiting. Emily gripped the microphone tightly. My name is Sergeant Emily Luna, she began, her voice strong and steady. I walked across this country to tell you about my brother James and the countless others like him. The audience leaned in, hanging on every word. They died for us, Emily continued, her voice unwavering. But too many of them have been forgotten. That must change. Trump stepped forward, his voice clear and resolute. And it will change starting today. We will honor these heroes in a way that lasts forever. The crowd erupted in applause. Emily looked out over them, her heart swelling with pride. This wasn't just her victory, it was theirs. After the speech, Trump turned to her. I have an idea, he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Emily listened closely as he explained. He wanted to build a new national monument, one that would include the names of every fallen soldier from the past 20 years. A place where families could come, where people could remember. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. You'd really do that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump nodded. This country needs to see their names. As the tears blurred her vision, Emily whispered, That's all I ever wanted. Trump extended his hand. Then let's make it happen. And so they did. The nation erupted with support. News outlets covered Emily's story, and thousands of families reached out, sharing their own stories of loss. One mother, whose son had died in combat, wrote, "For the first time, I feel like someone is listening." Emily read every letter, overwhelmed by the impact of her journey. Meanwhile, the government fast-tracked plans for the new memorial. Trump called Emily into his office. "You're coming with me to oversee the project," he said. Emily blinked in surprise. "Me?" Trump smiled. "Who else? This was your mission. Let's finish it together." A month later, Emily stood beside Trump at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new National Heroes Memorial. Shovels hit the dirt as cameras flashed. Families of fallen soldiers watched, some in tears. Emily whispered to herself, "James, we did it." After the ceremony, Trump turned to her. "I know you didn't do this for recognition, but people want to thank you." Emily shook her head. "I only did what was right." Trump smiled. "That's what makes you a true leader." For the first time in a long while, Emily felt at peace. But her work wasn't finished. Veterans across the country began reaching out, asking for help. One letter caught her eye. "I'm a veteran struggling with PTSD. You've inspired me. Please don't stop now." She showed it to Trump. "I walked across the country to share their stories," she said, "but what about the soldiers still with us?